Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you this Friday and in the last few days before the election and time of high stress, I think, for everybody with COVID-19, the election coming up, a time of real uncertainty, and a time when these mind-body approaches and the perspective that they give us are more important than ever. I'm certainly finding that myself. So it's a pleasure to be with you, and also a pleasure just to have a time in my busy day to sit comfortably, as I invite all of you to do. Sit comfortably with me and allow your breathing to deepen. And if it feels comfortable, to let your eyes close. Breathing slowly and deeply. Remember, this is a concentrated meditation. We're concentrating on the breath coming in through our nose and out through the mouth. And our belly softening and relaxing. And on the word soft as we breathe in, and belly as we breathe out. Allowing your whole body to relax with each exhalation, each out breath. Let the body relax a little more. Just a few more deep breaths, relaxing, focusing on the breath, on the word soft as we breathe in, and belly as we breathe out, and on the feeling of softening and relaxing in our bellies. If thoughts come, let them come. Notice them, let them go. Gently bring your mind back to soft belly. Okay, let's open our eyes. Let our attention come back into the room where we're sitting. Hmm. It's really good for me. A day like today, I've got one responsibility after another. We're in the middle of a training program here, working with Vision 8, which is the largest division of the VA hospital system. Very exciting to be working with all these healthcare providers who are taking this work of self-awareness, self-care, and group support out into the VA. So it's beautiful doing it. And I love what I'm doing. And everything is very busy. All kinds of other responsibilities coming up as well. And I'm sure many of you are having similar kinds of experience. A lot going on in the house, a lot going on online, a lot going on in the world. And there are moments, certainly moments, when I feel like my head is spinning. I don't know if any. The question suggests this may not be my issue alone, and my phone calls and my connecting with many hundreds, maybe thousands of people in recent weeks is making me sensitive to the fact that the level of stress and uncertainty is increasing with the prolongation of the pandemic, with the continued separation, with the continued confinement of many people, and with this election coming up, and with the sort of rage and um, hostility and mean-spiritedness that's coming out in some parts of our country is making people very, very uneasy, making everyone uneasy. And I woke up this morning with some of that feeling of uneasiness myself. I could just feel so weird. I wasn't sure exactly where it's coming from, and I realized it was coming from all over, and that it wasn't just all the responsibilities I have today and the deadlines I have to meet. Those, okay, I got those. But in addition, it's like the atmosphere is saturated with uncertainty, as well as with this with a kind of nastiness that's out there, and a kind of and a dishonesty that is coming up, and a rigidity that's present. So this work of self-awareness and self-care, and and the imperative of reaching out and connecting with other people, this is ever more important during this time. I really want to encourage you to practice what you've been learning. If you have a copy of the Transformation, read through it and find out, look at which chapters seem most relevant to you. And if you don't have a copy, I encourage you to get a copy and use it, and use these different techniques that can be uh, so helpful. And come back to the webinars. We have all of them are available. They're all free, and they're all available. And you can look at them and learn from them and practice the techniques with me. And this needs to be part of our daily life. For me, this is probably the third time I've done soft belly breathing today alone, and I'll probably do it 5 more times in the course of the day. Just a couple minutes, and it brings me into balance. It keeps my mind clear. So I'm here with you. I'm not thinking about what I did 20 minutes ago or what I'm going to do after we finish this webinar. I'm really right here with you. And so that means I can do my best, and I can get the satisfaction of doing my best. And I also have a feeling of relaxation. And it's a pleasure for me to be here with you, because I'm here. And that's the essence of meditation. It's not this sort of fancy esoteric thing that's only for the leisure class, or only for the people who are kind of weird or new agey. It's very basic, very fundamental. It's what we need to be including in all of our lives, and ensuring that we teach to our children, because it's bringing us into balance, and we need that balance more than ever today, and not only through the election, but in the months after the election, regardless of who wins, are going to be pretty chaotic, I think. And we need to be at our best, at our most balanced, to be able to deal with it. And we'll be talking about all that And I'll be having a number of guests on in the weeks after the election who will be here sort of helping me and helping all of us look at the possibilities for the future, how we can bring mind body approaches into many different sectors of our lives and of our work here in the United States, and also teaching tools and techniques and approaches and perspectives that I think will be useful not only here in the US but beyond our borders. So we'll be thinking about issues like climate change and healthcare and mental health and education and the political atmosphere. And we'll be bringing in people, we'll be bringing in elected officials and organizers and activists and people with a philosophical as well as a practical perspective on what needs to or should or could happen in the weeks, months, and years following the election. So I'm looking very much forward to that in these weeks ahead, sharing these people who are part of my world and sharing them and their vast experience and knowledge and wisdom too with you. Right now in this webinar, I just want to focus on some of the questions that have been coming up over this last week and addressing those. And there'll be plenty more time in subsequent webinars to address questions. These are reflective of this state of uncertainty and distress and disturbance that we're going through. So the first one, it's starting to feel like this pandemic will never end. I wake up often very cranky and agitated. How can I find hope during such a dark time? And I was a little cranky and agitated this morning. I can relate to that. And you know, if I was able to see all of you, I would say, how many of you feel like the pandemic will never end? And if you're anything like my colleagues and my friends and my family members, most of you would raise your hands and have that feeling. It is continuing. It certainly looks like we are in the early stages of what's likely to be a major surge in infections and hospitalizations. And, you know, we've gotten somewhat better at dealing with COVID-19 with people who've been hospitalized. So the death rate of hospitalized patients is going down significantly. That's beautiful. We're catching on. And it's still, with the surge in infections and increase in hospitalizations, there are many hospitals that are being overwhelmed. And many people are dying. I think 1,000 people or so died here in the United States alone yesterday. So it does feel like the pandemic will never end. The pandemic will end. Pandemics do end. That's the first thing. Just if you look at history, and I've spent some of my time reading some of the most interesting literature about previous pandemics and epidemics, which I at the beginning of the pandemic, I was rushing to read them and read pieces of books I'd read before, like the Decameron about the plague in the 14th century, and Camus' The Plague, which is a much more modern, and Defoe's a journal of a plague, journal of the plague, written about the 17th century plague. And I find myself, interestingly, going back to reading those again. Defoe is just brilliant on the plague. And what it does is, first of all, it gives me some perspective on the chaos and the confusion and the dissension that we're experiencing now, because same thing was happening back in London back in the day. There were crowds of people storming around in our political scene. There's our president and others are trying to find somebody to blame. Let's blame this one. Let's blame the other one. It's not our fault. It's theirs. And you go back and you read Defoe and you see the same thing was happening in London in the 1660s. Same kind of blame, same kind of large scale, both denial and avoidance and people trying to flee and go away and other people being enormously kind and generous. And ultimately, understanding that the plague does end. So, um, I recommend part of what I recommend is having that perspective, understanding that it will end, understanding that people have been through this before and have come out on the other side. Uh, Camus' The Plague is very interesting for how he's writing about Oran in Algeria and North Africa, and the sort of quarrels. I'm just at the beginning of my rereading now, and the quarrels among the doctors and the officials, some of whom don't want to scare people, so they're saying, no, it's not plague. And Dr. Rieu, who's the hero, the central character, saying, well, I don't really care what you call it, but people are dying and we have to do something. I kind of like that approach. So it's interesting to read those Boccaccio's Decameron. These are the stories that people are telling young people who flee the plague in Florence in the 14th century. They have the luxury, they're privileged. They go up in the hills, they tell stories to each other, which is just reminding us that we also need to, during this time, have some distraction. I am watching. I'm watching series on Netflix and series on Amazon Prime. And a source of a little bit of agitation is my Amazon Prime somehow went off. And I could feel myself, I could feel a little anxiety. Oh, I want to watch this series. I'm really interested in this one. So, but that's a beautiful place to go, is whether you go to music or whether you go to reading or fictional series or documentaries. I've been watching some of the wonderful documentaries, particularly Martin Scorsese's about George Harrison and Bob Dylan, and just enjoying those documentaries. And they're providing me with inspiration as well as with a relief from what's happening during the pandemic and from that feeling that the pandemic will never end. And ultimately, meditation is a kind of central to dealing with these feelings of it's never going to end. So when I'm sitting here, whether I'm doing soft belly with you or I'm teaching meditation, teaching shaking and dancing, or anything else to other people, I'm really not thinking much about whether the pandemic is going to end or not, because I'm there in the present. And I think the lesson is that when we get caught up, yes, we don't know when it's going to end, and it is uncertain, and it is anxiety provoking, and it's making us a bit cranky. I could feel that, and I could feel it again this morning. But when I bring myself back into this present oriented meditation, the agitation and the crankiness kind of disappear like clouds, floating away or melting away, and I'm in the present, and the time does not look so dark. The uncertainty hasn't gone away. I'm just not so preoccupied by it. I don't know when it's going to end, but it's not as much of a concern to me. What's happening right now becomes a central concern. So I certainly hope it'll end reasonably soon. I'm sort of looking at next summer, and when I think about such things, that'll be a time that should be considerably safer. I don't know that for sure. That gives me some hope, which I'm happy to share with you. But I also think gaining perspective, finding occupations and vocations and avocations that are pleasurable for us, and connecting with other people, and more and more using meditative practice. As I said, I've probably done soft belly 4 or 5 times already today. I'll do it 5 more times today. It keeps me in balance, keeps me from being overwhelmed by that uncertainty. Okay, number 2, I really miss meeting new people and exploring new places. I know that this might not be possible again for a long time. Is there anything that can mimic this feeling these days? Great question. And I'm somebody in the 3 years or so, 4 years before the pandemic, I was on the road as much as 3 weeks out of every month. I was going to new places, doing our work, sharing our work with communities all over the United States, all around the world. Uh, and, was getting ready to go to South Sudan again and sort of take the next steps with our program there, getting ready to go to Central Asia, work with the U.S. Institute of Peace in Central Asia, really excited about these projects that are going on. I can't do them. So, how to deal with this difficulty meeting new people and exploring new places? I think the meeting new people. First of all, I think we have to meet the old people a little more intimately, perhaps a little more deeply than we have. I would start there. This is an opportunity for us to deepen our relationships with people we already know. So to me, what I'm discovering in some of the people with whom I'm spending more time on FaceTime or Zoom calls or on the phone is I'm getting to know them better. And I want to get to know them better. And they seem like new people to me because I've gone to another depth or we've expanded the breadth of our connections. And so for me, that's my primary focus. As far as new people go, I had this opportunity today. I'm doing a seminar tomorrow, and the person who invited me is somebody I know somewhat, and I had the choice of just. She gave me very good instructions for what I should do at the seminar, what I should talk about, how I should present it, but I thought, and she said, I'd like to meet with you, but we don't have to. And I thought, no, I'd like to meet with you, partly because I want to get more information about what I'm going to be doing, but also just because I'm enjoying getting to know her and enjoying the exploring our relationship, and which may deepen in various ways. We may work together in various ways. So let's get on a call, even if it's a brief one. And before the pandemic, I don't think I would have done that. So taking the opportunity where new people appear. I know a lot of people are meeting new people in classes that they're doing online and finding that, I think that's a great thing to do. And especially classes where you get to see each other online. It's not just looking at somebody like me, but where you can come together. Or mind body skills groups, which you can, people are meeting new people. The groups I've been doing online, both as part of our training programs and the 8-week group that I did mostly with frontline healthcare providers and other physicians and sort of city officials in various places. Those people are staying connected with each other, many of them. And they're getting to know each other, and I'm getting to know them. So that's an opportunity that we have to offer. Same thing in our trainings. But classes also provide that opportunity. As far as exploring new places, that's, if you can't go, it's a bit harder. I think part of it, again, is for me, is exploring the places I can easily go to, which is at this point, my neighborhood. And as I walk around the neighborhood, and as I do so in a more mindful way, I'm finding new things to see. I'm finding discovering new trees, looking at interesting new houses, seeing people I've never seen before. And one of the nice things about the pandemic that I found is that people are generally, at least in my neighborhood, more friendly. And sometimes I'm on my porch doing Tai Chi, and I wave to people going by. I don't know those people. They don't know me. Just like, hi, how are you? We're all in this together. And it reminds me same thing on the street. Some people are avoidant, which I can understand, but other people, yes, say, hey, how you doing? It's good to see you. People in the stores, there's a kind of openness. We're all in this together, and we're all dealing with these stresses. So those people who are new to you, who are nearby, and this environment that's easy to get to, I have to say, it reminds me a bit of the 60s. Uh, I'm old enough to have come to adulthood in the 60s. And what was happening then is we were saying hi to each other on the street. We were making friends. We'd sit in a coffee house, and you'd sit with somebody and you'd start talking about whatever. I used to live in the Haight-Ashbury during the summer of love. And I'd go to the coffee house there, and people would sit down with me, and the conversation was maybe a little curious. The first question might be, "Hey man, what's your sign?" And so it's about astrology. Beautiful. So we talk about that, and there's a feeling of we're discovering something new. That's what the 60s were all about. We're challenging received norms. I remember being in the black churches in the South, and people being so friendly, and people in the civil rights movement. Not that there weren't struggles, but there was a sense that we're in this together, and we're brothers and sisters, and we're here to create something new, something kinder, more compassionate, more adventurous, more universal, and that we're in it together. And part of that was reaching out and connecting with people whom you didn't know, and just being friendly. And I know that that's crucially important. And for me, I'm amazed that, just waving to somebody. The other day, the guy who delivers my mail um, was delivering the mail. I was on the porch doing Tai Chi. He was, I think he'd taken off his mask, he had a mask around his neck, but my mailbox was away from where I was doing the Tai Chi. He looked at me and said, "Hey man, you're doing the Tai Chi." Yeah, I said, "Yeah, yeah." He said, "It looks like it's Yang style," which is a particular form in Tai Chi. I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's from Professor Chang Man Ching and the students." And he said, "Yeah, yeah, my teacher was one of the students of a student of Professor Cheng Man Ching." And so we had this conversation. And the mailman's been coming for a couple of years. We've never talked before. All of a sudden, we're talking and having this really nice conversation. So I encourage that. And I also encourage the possibility, if we can't explore new places and actually go there, of exploring new places in our mind and in our imagination. I mentioned earlier those documentaries about musicians, that I'm watching more and more of those. They're really opening me to, and documentaries, and also fictional accounts of musicians. There's one about Coltrane, John Coltrane, one about Miles Davis. I'll watch both of those. So it's a new place in my. I mean, these are musicians I love, but I'm discovering new things about them, new places in my mind, and I'm tuning into the music in a sort of different way, a new place of attunement, if you will, to the music. And I want to catch some of the late Anthony Bourdain's series, about where he would go places and eat wildly different food and have interesting conversations with interesting people. So I've seen a couple, and I want to see some more. And that way, at least imaginatively, I can go to those places, and I can imaginatively hang out with him and the people he's meeting, and imagine the food. And one of the things that I've been doing, I was watching, I can't remember what it was that I was watching about China. And all of a sudden I thought, well, let me see if I can make a dish for myself, more a Chinese style dish. So I found a cookbook that was sitting around somewhere about Chinese recipes. I don't usually use cookbooks, but this is a new place in my experience. I haven't used cookbooks really for 40 years or more. And all of a sudden I'm looking in the cookbook, and I'm kind of improvising this Chinese dish. And so those are my suggestions for new people, new places, and ourselves. Okay, I'm already feeling nervous about the thought of being in a crowd when the pandemic subsides. The thought of using the metro or going to a concert really scares me. Will I ever be able to enjoy these types of events again without fear and anxiety taking over? It's a beautiful question. I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. And I think it's absolutely legitimate question. that where we have been traumatized or where we're anticipating danger right now, being in a crowd is dangerous. And so we're ultra careful, I hope, about being in crowds. And if we're outside and there are people around, we should be wearing masks and we should be keeping our distance. So that anxiety is there. And that anxiety is not going to go away right away when the threat of the pandemic ends. It will subside considerably. I think what's going to help it subside is clear, authoritative, trustworthy, scientific guidance. I think one of the reasons that everybody is so anxious and agitated, and one of the reasons the questioner may be anxious and agitated about the future, is because we don't know who to trust. We don't know. And the information now, there's such contradictory information. The president says one thing, Tony Fauci, who actually knows about epidemics and pandemics, says something else. People feel caught in the middle, even if you don't believe President Trump at all. The fact that somebody in that position of power is saying everything's okay, it's all going to go away, probably raises certain doubts in most people's mind because he's in a position of authority and he's saying it over and over again. So we're in this state, even if we're pretty good scientists and we're pretty good at evaluating information, we're feeling the contradictory information and that uncertainty about what we should do and what's going to happen and when it will be safe. So the first thing is to recognize that's what's going on. And the fear and the anxiety is understandable. Second thing is bring yourself back to the present. Don't spend too much time there. Meditative mind, moving your body, sharing with other people, using your imagination, doing something useful for yourself and useful for others. So that question will recede in its importance. Third thing is know that when the time comes, hopefully by then, we'll have clear, fairly unambiguous information about what the case actually is, what's safe, what's not safe. And also, the more we cultivate the meditative mind, the more we will be able to, first of all, distinguish between what is actually safe, what's not safe, what precautions should I take, so that we will definitely up our odds of being safe. And at the same time, the more we have used our mind in that way, the more we'll be able to relax in situations that are safe or that we've made safe, so that when the time comes to actually go out, we'll be able to do so in a more relaxed way. I've seen this I really appreciate the question because I've seen this after traumas everywhere in the world. So people, after a situation in which it's unsafe to go in the street, because there's been a war going on, everybody's anxious at first. So this is where this whole approach, this whole mind-body medicine comes in handy, understanding that the anxiety is there. We've experienced stress and trauma for these situations. Even after the threat has lifted, there are no planes flying overhead, no bombs falling. There still is the anxiety that we want to get out. We want to be outside, just as all of us do now. And we're anxious about it. So we need to relax, and we need to do it at our own pace. You mentioned going to on the metro or going to a concert. Well, start in a way that feels comfortable. Maybe start with an outside concert. Start with one you can walk to, or start with one that you can get a lift to from a friend. Start in a way that feels comfortable and know that you'll hopefully have the wisdom to do that once the pandemic ends. But for now, I refer you back to the previous question and just create an atmosphere that is as rich as possible, as varied as possible, as connected as possible, and do what you can to connect closely with other people and share with other people. Now, next question. What are the best food, drink options to help me boost my mood during these times, instead of being drawn to comfort foods like I would usually go to in order to feel happier? I gave a talk, I gave a webinar. We did a webinar on the trauma healing diet, and then I just did one the other day with Mark Hyman on sort of eating foods to keep ourselves in balance. So I'm just going to please refer to those and refer to the chapter in the transformation where I go into this in great detail in the chapter on the trauma healing diet. But suffice it to say, we go to comfort foods because those high sugary, fatty, salty things, they temporarily relieve our stress, lower levels of cortisol, improve levels of serotonin and dopamine and endorphins. It's understandable. Bring mindfulness into your eating, a little bit of comfort food. So I still eat comfort foods. I just eat less. I eat them slowly. I savor them. So 3 tablespoons of tapioca pudding instead of a huge bowl that I might eat. Eaten slowly, eaten when I really want that food. Satisfies me for the most part. I don't need them as much. I'm eating them. I'm eating a little more comfort food than usual, and my portions are much smaller. The other thing is bring mindfulness into all your eating. There are many kinds of diets that will help you stay in balance. Mark Hyman and I were talking about. We were just joking around about the vegan diet, a combination of the paleo diet and the vegan diet. All of those diets that emphasize whole foods, that emphasize if you're going to be eating animals or animal products, emphasize eating those that have not been contaminated by pesticides and herbicides and hormones and all the rest of it, and eating mindfully. And if you eat slowly and mindfully, you will eat less. Now, there are other substances that are helpful during this time. Coffee, for some people. I drink coffee. I have my cup of coffee right here. And it's gives me some energy, helps me to focus. If coffee does that for you, other caffeinated beverages do that for you, not Diet Coke or Cokes. I know nothing personal against them. The problem is it's a huge dose of sugar or a huge dose of artificial sweeteners. So I drink my coffee. I drink it without cream, without sugar. It helps me to focus. Nora Ephron. I was watching a documentary about Nora Ephron that her son did. Lovely documentary about her. She was the writer, the one who wrote Sleep and directed, I think, Sleepless in Seattle and When Harry Meets Sally and a bunch of others. She said, coffee is the writer's crack cocaine. I laughed at that, but it's true. It gets you focused. I use it for writing. I use it to get me, and I don't drink a huge amount, maybe max 2 cups during the day. But I have a cup. It's black. When it gets cold, I put some ice in it. I have iced coffee. Some people are smoking cannabis during this time. It's legal here in Washington, D.C. It can be, for some people, very relaxing. A lot of people have found it to be, I can certainly find it be relaxing and mind expanding. A lot of people have found it extremely helpful for trauma and stress. Not good for kids, because kids' brains are still developing up to, and so probably much better for people who are older. Kids, you want to stay away. CBD, let me just talk a little bit about cannabis here, because we haven't talked about it. Well, we did talk about it. Rick Doblin was on one of these webinars. We didn't talk a lot about cannabis, marijuana, pot, boo, chronic, whatever you want to call it, grass, weed. Regular smokable cannabis, the kind people who've been smoking for millennia. For some people, it relieves anxiety. It's anxiolytic, and there's plenty of research on it, and there are good biological reasons. For those people, smoking sometimes, occasionally, not when you're driving, but just smoking when you're trying to relax, it can be very, very helpful. A lot of vets I know who are seriously traumatized have found cannabis useful. Other people who are made anxious, agitated, and paranoid when they smoke, stay away. It's anxiogenic for you. Fancy phrase, means it causes anxiety. Don't smoke. So you got to find out, just like with coffee. Some people, it's beautiful, it's relaxing, it's focusing, it's energizing. Other people get tense and jittery. People who get tense and jittery, stay away. You are slow metabolizers of coffee. The fast metabolizers, and I guess I'm a fast metabolizer, I haven't tested for it, they enjoy coffee and it doesn't make them jittery, doesn't keep them from sleeping. The other thing I want to mention is CBD, cannabidiol, which doesn't give you a high, but is extremely relaxing. Many people I know are finding during this time CBD oil is very helpful for sleep, and it can also be very helpful for anxiety. I've used it for sleep for a while. It's very helpful. I find it makes it easier for me to sleep. I sleep well. I don't get up during the night. No hangover in the morning. Um, Kids can use, and again, you have to, ideally, you would have a pediatrician who would help you think this through. CBD has been very helpful for seizures in kids, epilepsy, um, but it's also sometimes helpful for kids who are extremely anxious or have trouble sleeping. So check it out, see what makes sense. These can help us stay in balance, and so we won't be. But mindfulness is the most important piece. Mindfulness about what we eat, how we eat it, how fast we eat it, and also with whom we eat it. It's very nice sometimes to um, be on a screen with somebody, having a little bit of food or having a glass of wine with them. Okay, final question for today. Now more than ever, it feels more difficult to maintain close relationships with family and friends who are voting for Trump. I'm not quite sure how to move ahead without feeling constantly frustrated and angry with them. Well, the voting will be over in a few days. Well, or a few days after Tuesday, we'll all know. So we'll be in a whole different phase, a phase of recriminations, a phase of regrets. We'll talk more about that next week. Right now, um, this is difficult, and it's very difficult for people who are opposed to Trump, who see him as a disaster as a president, and who don't understand why other people are so attached to him and um, feel so favorable about him and respect him and want to support him and feel he's supporting them, when it may look to those of us who oppose Trump like he's actually undermining those people, those sort of working class, middle class people whom he says he's all for. To us, it looks like, what are you thinking? How could you be thinking that? Haven't you looked at how he's undermined so many protections for working people all over the country, and how this economy, which is reflected in the stock market, how that's not really affecting all the rest of us so well, and that we haven't had the relief that we need during the pandemic. Anyway, so it's very hard for those of us who are opposed to him and have very good reasons for being opposed to understand how others can support him. So I would say, as difficult as it sometimes is to be curious. And I am genuinely curious. I am curious about why whoever is supporting him is supporting him. And so what I do, and I don't think any members of my immediate family or close friends are supporting him, but I certainly do meet people who support him. And my question is, well, how come? Tell me. And sometimes they think, well, he doesn't really want to know. He just wants to argue with me and show me how dumb I am or whatever. But I I am genuinely curious. I do not understand it. I want to understand it. And I want to understand um, what's going on. And if those people are close to me, just like I want to understand uh, other opinions. For example, I'll give you an example. This doesn't have to do with Trump or politics, but has to do with medicine. There are people in my family, many of whom love and respect and admire everything that I'm doing, and want to learn from me about the techniques and tools that I'm using. But there are others who really don't, and they want to, for example, uh, they want to rush to get on antihypertensive medication right away. Blood pressure's up. My doctor says to do it, I've got to do it. And the fact that I may have worked with hundreds or thousands of people with high blood pressure, including myself, and lowered the blood pressure with diet and exercise and meditation, they say, that's nice, but I don't want it. So I've had to learn to, okay, well, tell me what you're doing, and tell me why you're doing it, and tell me how it's going. And okay, now I understand what you're doing. And I have to deal with my own anxiety about their health, my own irritation to them. How can you not listen to me? I'm an expert. I've been doing this for 50 years. It's helped all these people. I have all this scientific research. I have to get over myself and just relax, listen, be present to what they're saying, and then say, well, I'm here. If you change your mind, or if you have any questions, or if you're interested in what I'm doing or the way I look at things, I'm happy to tell you. And one of the things that I've found in even about Trump is that with some of those people whom I met, where I've had those discussions, I'm thinking of a guy. I was out in North Dakota at Standing Rock a couple of years ago for the demonstrations, and I was supporting the people from the reservation and supporting the people who'd come from all over the country to demonstrate against the pipeline. And I had a driver who drove me out there from the airport, and he drove me back. And on the way back, and he was very much a totally Trump supporter. And he was telling me why. And he thought that Trump was going to help the small businessman. And he pointed to the stock market. He thought Eastern liberals, and he was very polite. He said, not you, but Eastern liberals are a pain in the ass. They think they're so much better than other people, and they think they know more, and they don't respect us, and so on. We went on. And I was listening to him. It was really interesting to me. Why? Because he's a working man. He had a cab company with a few cabs. He wasn't a rich person, but he was thinking that Trump would eventually, the tax breaks would come to him. And yes, he recognized. And we're driving through a town, and he was telling me, he didn't like all these environmental regulations, and he was glad that Trump was dismantling them because it made things freer, and he did some farming on the side. It made it easier for him. Nobody's going to tell him he couldn't use herbicides or pesticides. It went on like that. And then we were driving through a town. This was early in the morning, but I noticed all the buildings are boarded up. And I said, or many of the buildings are. I said, what's going on? He said, well, what happened here is the plant up the river was polluting the river terribly, and that pollution started to seep up through the floors of the houses, and these businesses and some of the residences became uninhabitable because there was so much dangerous pollution. And so I just looked at him. I turned around and looked at him, and he got it. And he looked at me and he said, well, maybe we do need some environmental regulation. So I want to leave you on that light and hopeful note, and just relax. Let these people tell you when you have an opportunity. Share what you have to share. I wouldn't spend a lot of time arguing, and when there's an opportunity, see if maybe something you have to say might be able to be assimilated, that they might be interested in, might welcome it. And what I've found in general is if I'm not so confrontational, if I take a few deep breaths and relax, then other people stop being quite so confrontational. Not always, but often enough. So let's come to a close, and then we will explore next week where we are after the election, and how we can move ahead in the best possible way with ourselves and with those whom we care for, those whom we love, and in our communities. So for now, let's just take a minute or two to breathe deeply together. Closing our eyes if that's comfortable. I like closing my eyes, removing external stimulation. Breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth with our bellies soft and relaxed. focusing on the breath, on the word soft as we breathe in, belly as we breathe out, and our belly softening and relaxing. If thoughts come, let them come, notice them, let them go. Gently bring your mind back to soft belly, to this relaxed, meditative, moment-to-moment awareness. The antidote to the fight or flight response, to the stress that we're experiencing, relaxing, being present. Okay, open your eyes, let your attention come back in the room. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, let's have a good election. Let's have a good life for this next week. Let's be present and enjoy this reality that we have. Bye-bye.